There are lots of ghosts and demons and wendigos and vampires in Supernatural, but I want to know how accurate they are to real folklore. Why we question the accuracy of a 20-year-old CW show? I don't know. But I like ghosts, and it's a question that's been stuck in my mind for quite a while now. So let's go and find out. Ghosts. There are a few different types of ghosts across season 1 of Supernatural, such as the Vengeful Spirit, the Woman in White, which is just the Vengeful Spirit with extra steps, and Cursed Objects, which is also Vengeful Spirits with extra steps as well. I'll start with the Vengeful Spirit. In Supernatural, Vengeful Spirits are the ghosts of people who have been wronged in their lives. This is usually over what ended up killing them, and they seek revenge by killing whoever killed them. They often go beyond their own revenge and start attacking random people who had nothing to do with their death in the first place. They're pretty much the baseline to all ghosts and the most basic monster. To kill them, you have to salt and burn their bones. And if that doesn't work, then they're attached to an object and you need to go and destroy that by burning it as well. In real life, this is basically 100% the same. Like a lot of ghosts, vengeful spirits are pretty much a part of every culture worldwide. And just like Supernatural's lore, there isn't really much information on them because it's so vast that everyone has a different story. Some cultures believe they can come from improper burials and funerals, but that's kind of similar to supernatural lore in a way. In real life, they say exorcisms is the best way to stop them, but it is also agreed that you can salt and burn their bones, but obviously that's going to be quite difficult to do in the real world. Apparently, if you did bury them wrong, you can fix it by doing the correct ceremony, but obviously that isn't in Supernatural because it'd be a very fucking boring show to watch. The Woman in White. A classic in folklore and famously the first monster that Sam and Dean fought. In Supernatural, these were the ghosts of women who had children and then their husband was unfaithful to them. They subsequently kill their children and then themselves. And then they spend the rest of eternity looking for the very children they killed. They also hunt for other unfaithful men that have nothing to do with them and kill them as well, a bit like the Vengeful Spirit, but it is just unfaithful men instead. But if the man does not act unfaithful, then they will force themselves upon the man until he has been forcibly made unfaithful. Unfaithful? Oh well. A good example of that is Sam in that first episode of Supernatural where he gets forced upon by that woman in white. They're basically just like a more feisty, vengeful spirit in a way, really. And for some reason they can turn from their living to decayed self. I don't really see what the point of that is and how that would work, but I guess they needed a way to make the ghost look scary. I guess. Anyway, like in real life with the Vengeful Spirit, the Woman in White is shared across about 1 billion cultures, so there is plenty of different stories going around. And that of course means there isn't really a specific lore to base anything off of. But generally they aren't restricted to just being people with unfaithful husbands and children. I'd say they're about under the same rules of death as a vengeful spirit, but it is almost always likely to involve loss and tragedy, so I guess that's where the unfaithful husband comes in Supernatural. They're said to be found in rural areas, and more often than not, this will be it. I'd say a specific Supernatural episode takes a lot of inspiration from Filipino folklore. They say there is a white lady of Balit Drive, I'm just going to say Balit, who has apparently got into taxis asking for a lift. And when the drivers turn around to look at her, they say she looks like she had been beaten to death. So I guess you could argue that ability to switch to a more decayed version of themselves in Supernatural has some accuracy, though they're not really said to be aggressive like in Supernatural. I'm sure there's some cases somewhere of some sort of tale. I think a better, more accurate depiction in modern media of a woman in white would be the ghost of Bella Noire in Red Dead 2, as the focus is on her tragic story and what led to her death. You could even argue that Molly from season 2 episode 16 is a good example of a woman in white, despite the fact she's not a woman in white. But still, the idea that she was involved in a tragic death and she's on the side of the road asking for help kind of fits in with that theme. I'd also like to quickly look at Cursed Objects, though they're also not really that far from Vengeful Spirits, so we'll keep it quick. There isn't really much on them, but it's quite a well-known idea of ghosts haunting objects. I even found this whole website that claims to sell haunted dolls. Why you would buy one, I don't know, but if you like that stuff, then there you go, I guess. I mean, the truck from season 1 that is racially motivated to murder people, there are plenty of stories of cars that are like phantom cars, but not like that. I mean, you never know. I mean, anyone dies and technically anyone could become a ghost, so I'm sure there would be racist ghosts out there. There isn't really much to get wrong with haunted objects, as there really isn't much lore to them. Anyway, they're all dealt the same way, burning bones or burning the objects in which they haunt, and cold iron and salt can both be used as a form of protection against them. I'd say they are pretty much right there in Supernatural. I'd say that's very accurate. Like I said, there really isn't anything to get wrong here. Wendigo. In Supernatural, the Wendigo is a monster who started off human, but after being forced to eat human flesh, slowly turned less and less humanoid until they were the monster that is the Wendigo. They're said to rarely be seen out of northern Midwestern states, specifically Michigan and Minnesota. They tend to hibernate in the winter and store food, and this includes keeping victims in dark, cold places such as the mines and caves. They usually look almost humanoid and stand at over 6 feet. They often look malnourished, which is a symbol of their greed and hunger. They have large sharp teeth and often have chunks of skin missing from where they have bitten themselves or eaten themselves. In real life, the folklore comes from Native American tribes from said areas. The real story is quite similar to Supernatural. They have also come from people who have resorted to cannibalism. But it also adds on to that, saying that people who have displayed extreme levels of gluttony can also become one. It's believed this tale was created to make tribe members moderate themselves and to keep cooperation within the tribe itself, hence the symbols of greed that are in Supernatural. They are said in real life to resort in the northern Minnesota and Michigan woodland areas, as well as going up into central Canada. Visually, the legend is different between different tribes. In Algonquian lore, it is described as a giant with a heart of ice. Its body is skeletal and deformed with missing lips and toes. The Ojibwe described it as, it was a large creature, as tall as a tree, with a lipless mouth and jagged teeth. Its breath was a strange hiss and its footprints were full of blood, and it ate any man, woman or child that ventured into its territory. They say those are the lucky ones, as sometimes the Wendigo possesses them instead, and when the person is possessed by one, they themselves will slowly turn into a Wendigo. I think this fits Supernatural very well to what they did. In real life, they are described as being exceptional hunters, which matches with a lot of the strengths that Supernatural provides us with, such as the speed, the strength, the eyesight, the stamina, the senses and the agility. Although it's not stated in Folklore if they possess all of these abilities, they would all add up to create a really good hunter. And to me, I'd say that's accurate enough to the real lore. In Supernatural, you can kill it by burning it or by silver or steel to the heart. This is partly true. Silver would work, but any other metal would just get you torn to shreds, and I wouldn't really recommend that. But it's not over. Once you shatter the heart by stabbing it with the silver, you then must bury it in a silver box in a cemetery. And then you must dismantle the corpse with silver and then salt and burn it, and then you must finally scatter the ashes in the winds. Skip one of the steps and the Wendigo will resurrect itself and then just hunt you down with a massive grudge against you, making sure you die a much more painful death than they ever did. Dean burning it in episode 2 should have had him dead. And the thing is, I don't know why they didn't have this, because I think it would have made for a much more interesting episode if they had to do all of that. Demon. Because of how much lore is on demons, I want to focus solely on the disaster causing demon in season 1, as well as maybe a bit on the black-eyed demons as well. Supernatural states that demons are the result of souls going to hell and being tortured until there is no humanity left in them. They are spirits that revel in pain and torture, and they engage in such activities because they have forgotten what it's like to be human, or just because they want to avoid being tortured themselves. Some also truly support Lucifer's agenda, and they see themselves as morally right. This in itself is already very inaccurate to real law. There is no source that states they were once humans other than Supernatural itself. And simply put, demons themselves are just angels that rebelled against God, the same way Lucifer did. They're just lower down a hierarchy, and humans themselves have to stay as souls of the damned. In Supernatural, demons are shown as black smoke when they have manifested on Earth. They do have a true form which angels and people just about to go to hell can see, with Dean himself saying they look chopped. When they possess a human, the only visible evidence is when their eyes turn black, and that's up to the demon when that happens. Now, going back to real lore, it's said if present, demons tend to stay quiet, doing their malevolent work secretly. Some people claim to have seen black smoke, and they get usually accredited to being demonic hauntings and stuff. But it seems Supernatural's demons are just stuck as black smoke until they go and possess someone. The Bible states that it is mostly people who are not under the protection of God that will get possessed, and that possession is rare due to God limiting the abilities of demons. So the fact demons are always possessing someone is very inaccurate and supernatural. Though they do say God is missing later on, and I'm not sure if that has anything to do with it. The whole black eye thing is just something that they've added to make it obvious when someone is possessed and when someone is not. I think that's a good thing though, otherwise I think watching it could get quite confusing. Since demons are agents of chaos, the Phantom Traveler is something that is technically lore accurate. The entire concept of a demon causing a plane crash is technically entirely possible and well within what would be considered something they would do. It's also stated in the Supernatural Wiki itself that Dean uses an EMF reader in this episode, and that would not be possible as an EMF only reads ghosts. The weaknesses of demons I'd like to look at quickly are Salt and the Devil's Trap. The Devil's Trap's interesting because there's a lot of lore to it, but Supernatural itself seems to have influenced that lore on what it looks like. From what I can gather, I'm pretty sure the one in Supernatural is not correct and would not stop anything. But it is based on the Seal of Solomon, which is actually featured in Supernatural, but they don't use it as far as I'm aware or can remember, to be fair. Though I imagine they changed it as trying to paint it would be a massive pain in the arse when there is a demon outside trying to kill you. The idea of the trap is there, but the lore is completely different, very confusing, and also in Latin, so I can't really read it. So the accuracy of demon lore is pretty poor here, I'm gonna be honest, but I think their intentions fit well for what they wanted to do for the show. Bloody Mary. Though Bloody Mary in Supernatural is technically a vengeful spirit, I've decided to do it separate as it is basically completely different. As I mentioned, she is a vengeful spirit and she's attached to a mirror. Sam and Dean themselves aren't even actually sure if she's real or not in the episode, stating that it's just an old wives' tale. She makes those who say her name 3 times in the mirror have their eyes bleed out until, well, they die. Well, actually, it's not quite that simple. She seems to target those who have involvement in other people's deaths and have bottled up guilt, with the person's reflection telling them that they're at fault while Mary just kind of chills in the corner. The actual myth of Bloody Mary is quite vague. Depending on who you talk to, you could get a very different result of what happens if you summon her in the mirror. Sources say she would scratch participants in the face or just haunt them forever. I've also heard that she can show people's future spouses if she feels like being chill, but I can't find the source to that anymore. I've just lost it. Basically, there really isn't a strong piece of folklore here to base it off of, other than the mirror and the chant. So, although you could say that Supernatural has done something completely different to the original idea, it wouldn't surprise me if people have a similar story to what happens if you summon her in the mirror. Though it is suspected that Bloody Mary is based on 3 different people, that being Queen Mary I of England, Elizabeth Bathory, although I don't know where the idea of the name being Mary comes from there, or Mary Worth, a suspected witch that was executed in the Salem witch trials. Once again, there is literally little to no evidence backing this up, other than their backstories involving lots of death and murder, hence the bloody part of Bloody Mary. Ironically, the woman in Supernatural is called Mary Worthington, though it seems there is no correlation to her and the real Mary Worth. Basically, you can't argue that this is accurate or not to whatever suspected folklore there is. There is basically nothing behind the story, so the show has every right to make something up for this episode. Like I said, Sam and Dean were even shocked to find out that this was real within the episode, which almost shows the show's own self-awareness to including it. Shapeshifters. Shapeshifters is another piece of folklore that spreads wide across the world. There are many different tales with many different creatures. Greek mythology has tricksters, though that's something completely different in Supernatural. Navajo mythology famously has skinwalkers, though that's also something different in Supernatural. And across Europe, there's the werewolf, which once again is something completely different in Supernatural. So what actually is the shapeshifter? Well, Supernatural states that they are humanoid creatures that were in fact once human, and then they learn and gain the ability to change their form into anyone they want. They can turn at any point in their life because they are literally just humans who have learnt this ability. And because of this, they have the same urges, desires, and also flaws. No matter matter where I looked, I was unable to find a shapeshifter lore quite like this. Human to human seems to be a very uncommon tale. Most of them say it's human to animal. The closest I could find was different gods across Mesopotamian and Norse mythology, like Loki and Enki, but both could shift beyond humanoid figures and become animals as well. There were also Irish bogey beasts, which could turn into animals or familiar humans to lure people into danger and to do harmful pranks towards people, but that is about it. I guess you could say that is something that supernatural shapeshifters would do. After all, they are humanoid and a lot of them turn quite sinister, but the actual lore itself doesn't add up. Due to the lack of similar lore, it is really hard to tell whether their strengths and weaknesses are actually accurate, because it seems they've literally just pulled the entire lore out their arse. Not much else to say on this one other than it is not accurate at all. Bug curse. The supernatural wiki states that this is a Yuchi tribe curse. On this page I also found out that Bloody Mary's is also a curse. I don't really get what it is then. Is it a vengeful spirit or a curse? But we have already covered that, so that doesn't really matter now anyway. Anyway, they say in Oasis Plains, Oklahoma, about 220 years ago, the cavalry came to relocate the Yuchi tribe, who were resistant. Eventually the cavalry got impatient and raided them at night, doing unspeakable things to all of the tribe until they were no more. On the 6th night of this, the dying village chief said no white man would ever tarnish this land again, and that the valley would be protected by nature. In this case, it's obviously overly aggressive insects, who raid whoever's living on top of said ground in the same manner that the cavalry did across 6 days. And the curse itself is actually unbreakable. Reading this, I thought there was going to be some actual lore here of how detailed and intricate everything was. But, well, I was wrong. The Yuchi tribe themselves are a real tribe who did in fact come from these parts of America, and they also do have town chiefs. So the actual location and tribe themselves is accurate, but the entire curse and story of the tribe getting raided and everything else is completely fake. I guess that isn't really surprising, because it is a bit too specific and works a little bit too well for the show. I mean, that's really all there is to say here. The tribe existed, raids did happen, but just not this raid that's in Supernatural, and nor did the curse, obviously. Scarecrow. So I wasn't really sure where to start with this one, but I saw on the Google page upon looking up this episode that the Scarecrow was a Norse pagan god. The idea is that the town gives sacrifices to said god, which is a scarecrow who resides in a field and can actually move and get off of his post, and in return they get protection from all that is bad. Blood sacrifices are a real thing that Scandinavian countries did to be on good terms with their gods, and also to get something good in return from said gods, such as a bountiful harvest, protection from disease, and good weather. Apparently these would happen at the start of each season, which obviously brings us to the first incorrect piece of lore. The town only seems to do it once a year in Supernatural. And the other thing is that blood sacrifices were almost always animals, and humans were very rarely done, and were usually left for very special occasions. After I've written this, I found out there is a specific page on the sacrificing they were doing on Supernatural, which was an absolute pain to find and is very hidden on the Supernatural wiki. Upon reading this, they said they sacrificed for fertility, and that the Scarecrow was a Vanir. Vanir is the race of gods that is responsible for wealth, fertility, and commerce. So this does in fact add up by being fertility sacrifice. Specifically, the god of fertility is Freya. If you can tell, I'm very terrible at pronouncing everything. Freya is associated with kingship, fertility, fair weather, peace, and prosperity. This also adds up to what the town wants. So it's safe to say that it's Freya who is possessing the Scarecrow. If it wasn't pleased, the Scarecrow would start to cause unfortunate events across the town, such as heavy rain, which would kill the crops. And on the final day, it would just kill indiscriminately to get its sacrifice. And that's just where the lore disappears. If you were to stop sacrificing to a pagan god, you would simply lose their favor, and you would just have lots of misfortune. And like I said earlier, they weren't hungry for humans, as it is portrayed in Supernatural. So basically, this town could just be giving them pigs, blood, and food to sacrifice to the god instead. I mean, this has obviously been done to make the episode much more tense, as if they were just giving away pigs and stuff, it wouldn't really matter. I also couldn't find anything on pagan gods possessing scarecrows. It said they had altars to give their sacrifices to. Once again, I think this is just the sake of being scary, but also the scarecrow does live in a field full of crops in which it does protect them. Basically, this is just all for the sake of the show again. The scarecrow ends up getting burned, which removes the ritual and the possession from the town. Of course, though, this wouldn't stop pagan gods from causing misfortune from stopping your offerings towards them. Overall, other than the idea of a sacrifice for a better harvest, this is not accurate at all. I guess at the end of the day, the main point of this episode was to be introduced to Meg, which is a way more important plot point for the show than the Scarecrow ever was, so yeah. Rawhead. This monster literally has a few minutes of screen time in the entire show. The Rawhead is literally just used to set up the premise of episode 12, giving Dean a reason to harshly electrocute himself and then gain heart problems. Quite simply, the Rawhead is a monster that lurks in basements and preys on children. They look humanoid but disfigured and often have leathery decaying skin. They often have sharp teeth and claw-like hands. They are very strong, very fast, and can only be killed by high voltage, hence why this creature's at the start of episode 12. I expected this creature to be fully made up, but there is actually a fair bit of folklore to it. Rawhead is another name for Bloody Bones, a type of boogeyman whose name sounds like the title card to a Horrible Histories episode.
Bloody Bones.
Of course, a boogeyman is a type of folklore that is used to scare children into good behaviour, hence why the Rawhead preys on children. The idea is that Bloody Bones hides in dark areas until you get a glimpse of him. If this happens, he will take you and eat you. His first written appearance is actually around 1584, so presumably the tale followed the pilgrims across into the Americas. I say this as the term Rawhead is specifically a Midwestern story, of which a wild boar was a witch's companion until a hunter shot it not knowing that it was someone's companion. The witch gets revenge by bringing the boar back to life, but instead it has a humanoid body where it eats the hunter and then proceeds to go and become a boogeyman and prey on children. And this might in fact be the most Midwestern story I've ever heard in my life. This is on par with Canada's The Moose Man.
Yeah, look like you about to take us to find the Moose Man.
Who the hell is the Moose Man?
Basically what I can gather is the writers just cobbled up some lore to create a monster Dean could fight so he could electrocute himself for that episode. I mean, they literally added that whole electrocution thing themselves. Visually, I'd say the Rawhead matches more with the British tale than the American one, but they probably didn't care and spent the whole of 15 minutes crafting this creature for that episode. Daeva. Daeva is a type of demon. Why are we doing this separate to the rest of demons? Because they are actually so different that I didn't realise they were supposed to be a type of demon. Supernatural states that Daeva is an ancient demonic creature of shadow. Basically, it's a shadow demon. They can be summoned by regular demons, and like hellhounds, they are both invisible attackers, and they do not need a vessel to cause havoc upon humans like regular demons do. If whoever is in control of them loses control of them, they will turn on that said person and tear them to shreds. This means they are quite dangerous as they're invisible, and they are also quite unpredictable. This was shown when Meg lost control of them and they took her out the window. Their strengths include invisibility, obviously, teleportation, super strength like everything else in Supernatural, flight, and big ass claws. Daevas can't be manifested in well lit rooms as they are, you know, shadow creatures, and they succumb to black magic, hence why they get angry at whoever takes control of them. Daevas originally come from very early Hinduism. They are gods who are rejected. They are often divided into sky, earth, and air divinities due to their affiliation with forces of nature. Different cultures say different things on their relation to demons. Later, Indian culture states they are demonic and possibly even stronger than demons, whilst Iranian culture denounces that idea. You'll find various different answers regarding on what they are if you look this up, as I found out whilst researching this part of the script. What I could figure is the only actual bit of truth from Supernatural is that they are sometimes considered demonic and that they cause havoc. There isn't even really much idea on them being shadow creatures. I mean, this seems to be a common thing with Supernatural, is just take the basic idea and some of the lore of a creature and then just create something completely different out of it. Tulpa. Supernatural states that the Tulpa is the result of many people focusing on the same idea and believing it whilst looking at a Tibetan spirit signal. Once manifested, the Tulpa takes a life of its own and is now just an actual thing, and people no longer have to believe it. According to John's diary, when a Tulpa is created, no matter what the creator's intent was, it will eventually just turn back on the creator. Apparently this ritual is called Dugfab, and a variation known as Dragpoi Dugfab is something that is specifically made with the intent of harming other people. The physical form of Tulpas becomes apparent when the mind begins to sense the spirit's presence. According to this lore and how episode 17 plays out, a Tulpa's strengths and weaknesses depend on what is written in the lore that people believe. We see Sam and Dean try and add the fact that Mordecai is vulnerable to iron, but they are unable to due to a server crash on the website. They end up burning the house down, as they assumed without the house in which Mordecai couldn't leave, he and the legend would burn down with it. About 2 minutes of research led me to the classic supernatural conclusion. Tulpas and the idea of people manifesting something out of their beliefs has little to nothing to do with Tibetan culture. The book that popularised the Tulpa is The Mothman Prophecies, written in 1978 by journalist and UFO enthusiast John Keel. He speculated that ghosts and alien sightings that resembled pop culture icons could just be Tulpas. It was Supernatural that later even more popularised the Tulpa with this exact episode. The original book that introduced us to the idea of the Tulpa, or the Tulpa, sorry. I've been calling it Tulpa the whole time, haven't I? Well, anyway, the book that introduces us to the idea of the Tulpa is 1929's Magic and Mystery in Tibet. This was written by traveller and theosophist Alexander David Neal. The history is a bit confusing, but from what I could gather, the idea of the Tulpa is some sort of exchange between theosophists and Tibetan translators, or something along those lines. Basically, the irony of the whole idea is the idea itself is made up, and the fact that many people believe it means that in a way you could actually use it to describe itself. Basically, there is no real lore here, so there isn't anything for Supernatural to get wrong. Technically speaking, from the books that are written, however, it is actually quite accurate. Shtriga. Looking at what Supernatural claims, a Shtriga is a quasi-vampiric witch which feeds off children's life forces and takes on the appearance of a friendly human to blend into society. If you had to look up half that statement because you're smooth brain like me, it basically means that the Shtriga is a witch that is partly vampire or has vampire tendencies and characteristics, but without actually being a vampire, and that it also feeds off children's souls, a bit like the Dementors in Harry Potter. This folklore actually comes from Albania. A Shtriga in its true form is an ugly old woman with grey or pale wrinkly skin, a prominent brow, a big nose and black eyes, though I'm 99% sure the one from episode 18 had milky pale eyes, like as if it was blind. In fact, it kind of looked like that white rat from Flushed Away. Strengths include long life expectancy due to consuming others' life force, the ability to drain one's life force and soul, being very difficult to kill, shape-shifting, super speed, strength and agility, like every other monster that is in Supernatural, electromagnetic interference, and also flight. To kill a Shtriga, you must use concentrated iron rounds. Just shooting them with this will injure them, but if it's feeding, it's at its most vulnerable, and it can be killed. It's also vulnerable to soulless beings, as there is no force of life for it to feed on, meaning that soulless beings are immune. I'm actually surprised and pleased to say that this is fairly accurate to the real lore. It's stated in Albanian folklore that the Shtriga would take the form of a woman and live undetected in a community. Being hard to find, one certain way to tell would be if a young woman had hair that was already turning white. The Shtriga not only fed off people's life forms and souls, but also their blood. They are usually described as being old women with pale green or blue eyes, kind of like the one in Supernatural, despite the fact that's the complete opposite to what the description says. So I'd say visually the lore is accurate. It's pretty much there, 100%. There is still plenty that's been changed, however. When they pray at night, they take the form of a bee, moth or fly. To catch a Shtriga, there is two methods. Follow it at night, and at some point it will vomit the blood of its victims. The blood can be bottled into an amulet to ward off future witches, and another way is by fastening pig bones to the doors of a church on Easter Sunday. The witch will be unable to leave said church, like the same way a demon can't leave the devil trap, and then you can capture it and kill it. Catholic legend says they can also be destroyed by holy water with a cross in it. A Shtriga starts off as human, but turns due to being childless or becoming evil from envy. They can also heal their victims by spitting in their mouth. All the strengths and weaknesses have just been made up by Supernatural, so they can basically just have the story lead the way they want it to, and as they do, they like to make it more tense. But it's finally nice to see something that has some relevancy to its lore. Vampires. Starting off with Supernatural, vampires are a race of blood-drinking humanoid creatures that were once human. In Supernatural, they have been driven to near extinction, though it only takes one to create more due to their ability to reproduce through transfusion, though they can reproduce in normal manners as well. They can live forever as long as they get their food, and of course that food is blood. They prefer human blood, and that victim has to be kept alive, otherwise it becomes toxic to them. However, some live off animal blood and blood bags because they don't want to kill humans. So not all vampires are necessarily bad, they just have their natural instinct to drink human blood. Vampires of course still look human as they once were. They now have a set of retractable fangs as well as their normal teeth, which they obviously use for feeding. And they usually reside in nests of 10, but that's not always the case. It depends on what person decides the life they want to live, I guess, if that makes any sense. And the younger members tend to do the hunting for their elders, and each nest has a leader who is usually the oldest member, and they're usually the ones who have turned the rest of the nest into vampires. Despite the fact they stay in their small nest or separate lives, vampires are all connected and will share information of victims. To cure a vampire, there is a very painful ritual, but they must not have fed on human blood, otherwise it will not work. It requires the blood of the vampire who turned them into a vampire, as well as other ingredients such as garlic and sage. To kill a vampire, you must cut off their head, unless you have a rare weapon designed to kill them specifically, such as the Colt. And even once dead, vampires can be resurrected, but you need access to the corpse and also being able to retrieve the soul from purgatory, which isn't exactly an easy thing to do. Now, something tells me a big chunk of this is just completely made up. The entire thing feels very CW because of how overly romanticized it is. I assume this is because this is right at the boom of the vampire and werewolf related shows that they started making at the same time as Supernatural. Vampires are a folklore that has been around for thousands of years and has spread across many different cultures, so it's very difficult to pinpoint a specific accurate lore. The typical vampire of course depicts fangs drinking blood, the undead being revived, and people who live on for hundreds or thousands of years. There are many methods to becoming a vampire, including sorcery, contagion, having a cat jump over your corpse, and being born with teeth, and also being born on Christmas Day. They also have very fast healing, which is in Supernatural. You can kill one by throwing a spear at their heart, fire, decapitation, and exposure to sunlight. Basically, from what I can tell, Supernatural has just taken different bits and pieces of different folklore to create their own version of the vampire. Some of their powers and abilities may be incorrect, and some lore has just been added, but I don't really want to linger on vampires too much, as I think it's quite obvious where it stands lore-wise. Some say vampires are more animalistic, but the modern depictions usually become more and more human until we get to the point of where Supernatural is made, where they are just basically humans. The entire idea of nests and hierarchy is completely made up. Reproduction is basically there. Resurrection is entirely made up, and the only thing I got about turning back to human was depending on the fiction or folklore you read. So basically it's a no. I would say for vampires, like ghosts, there is so much lore around them that it's almost impossible to get wrong. Supernatural has taken a lot of the correct pieces of folklore from across the years to create its very own, and then has added parts to make it fit the story and to give it that overly romanticized CW show feel. There's so much fiction and different stories that I think they could probably be let off the hook for this one. Anyway, I think it's quite obvious looking at the 12 different monsters that are across season 1 of Supernatural that really they just changed the lore and accuracy for it to fit better to how they want the show to play out, or just to make it more suspenseful. Who would have thought that a CW show aimed at teenagers would have done that. And honestly, I'm a little shocked there's only 12 different types of monster. What did they do in the other 10 episodes of season 1? I actually really can't remember. I'm sure I missed something or got something completely incorrect to the point where I piss a load of people off, so if I did, please comment it. If you enjoyed, please leave a like, and if you enjoy commentary stuff like this, please subscribe.